The morning sun rose over New just like it had for the past 70 years. Stood on the observation deck of the settlement's command center, watching farmers head out to their fields. The wheat was golden and ready for harvest. Children laughed as they ran toward the school building. Everything looked peaceful. Had lived on this colony world for most of his life. He remembered when his parents first arrived, when New was just a collection of prefab shelters and dreams. Now it was home to over 2 million humans spread across 3 continents. They had built cities, farms, and universities. They had made this empty world into something beautiful. The communication panel behind him beeped, turned and accepted the incoming transmission. The face of Ambassador Lee appeared on the screen. She looked tired. She always looked tired these days. "Commander, I have bad news," said. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "The Galactic Council has ruled against us. They have been granted full rights to New under the Ancient Territory Act." Felt his stomach drop. "That's impossible. We've been here for 70 years. We filed all the proper claims." "It doesn't matter," replied. "They found some old survey data from 1,000 years ago. The Council accepted it. We have 30 days to evacuate." "Evacuate?" His voice rose. "This is our home. Where are we supposed to go?" "I don't know," said quietly. "I argued for 6 hours. They wouldn't listen. They never listened to us, you know that." Did know that. Humanity had joined the Galactic Coalition 200 years ago with such hope. They thought they would find friends among the stars, partners in exploring the universe. Instead, they found a hierarchy where humans were at the bottom. Other species saw them as useful workers, nothing more. Humans built their cities, fixed their machines, and treated their sick, but they never got respect. "I'll start making arrangements," said, "but our people won't want to leave. Many were born here." "I understand," said. "Do your best, and be careful. They are not known for their patience." The transmission ended, stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he began making calls. 3 weeks later, the ships arrived. They didn't wait for the 30 days to expire. Commander stood in the settlement's main square with a delegation of community leaders, ready to negotiate for more time. The commander was a massive reptilian creature named OK. He towered over the humans, his scales gleaming in the afternoon light. "We are not ready to leave yet," said, keeping his voice steady. "We need more time to arrange transport for everyone." OK's eyes were cold and yellow. "The council gave you 30 days. That was generous. You should have started leaving immediately." "Our children are in the middle of their school year. Our harvest season just began. Please, just give us 2 more months." "No," OK said. "You will leave now. Anyone still here in 48 hours will be removed by force." The humans tried to evacuate as quickly as possible. Ships came and went, carrying people and whatever possessions they could manage. But 2 million people could not leave in 48 hours. It was impossible. The spaceports were overwhelmed. Families were separated in the chaos. Old people and young children struggled to board the crowded transports. In the Valley settlement, about 300 kilometers from the main city, Dr. Park worked frantically at the medical center. She was trying to stabilize patients for transport. Many were too sick to move safely. She had requested medical evacuation ships, but none had arrived. When the soldiers came to Valley, they did not ask questions. They did not check if everyone had left. They simply began destroying everything. Heard the explosions and ran to the window. She saw buildings collapse. She saw people running and screaming. She saw soldiers firing on civilians who had their hands raised in surrender. Grabbed her medical recorder. Her hands shook as she activated it and pointed it out the window. She recorded everything. The soldiers shooting children, the bombs destroying the school, the fires spreading through residential areas. She recorded it all, even as tears streamed down her face. When a squad of soldiers approached the medical center, ran. She grabbed what supplies she could carry and fled through the back entrance. Behind her, she heard more explosions. The medical center, full of patients too sick to move, was destroyed. Ran for hours through the wilderness. She finally reached a small spaceport where the last evacuation ships were leaving. She showed them her recorder. The captain's face went pale as he watched the footage. "Get on board," he said quietly. "We need to get this to Earth." The news reached Earth within 3 days. The massacre at Valley had killed 15,000 people, men, women, and children, entire families erased. The galaxy's response was silence. A few minor species offered quiet condolences. The major powers said nothing at all. Ambassador Lee requested an emergency session of the Galactic Council. She stood before the assembled representatives of 200 species and showed them recording. The chamber was silent as the images played. Bodies in the streets, burning buildings, children's bodies. When the recording ended, spoke. "This is what the Empire did to innocent civilians, to families who were trying to evacuate as ordered. I demand justice. I demand that they be sanctioned and that reparations be paid to the victims' families." The council members looked at each other. Finally, the head of the council, a floating gaseous being from the collective, spoke. "The Valley incident was unfortunate. However, the humans were warned to evacuate. They were within their legal rights to clear their territory." "Legal rights?" His voice shook with rage. "They murdered 15,000 people. Collateral damage is regrettable but sometimes unavoidable in territorial disputes," they said. "The Council will not censure the Empire for enforcing legitimate property claims." The chamber erupted in quiet conversations. None of the other representatives objected. They simply accepted this explanation. 15,000 human lives were just collateral damage. Lee stood very still. Then she reached up and removed her diplomatic badge. She placed it on the podium in front of her with a loud click that echoed through the chamber. "Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Coalition effective immediately," she said. Her voice was cold and clear. "We will have no further diplomatic relations with this council or its member species. Consider yourselves warned." Several council members laughed. A few looked amused. The representative actually smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Warned about what, little human?" Looked directly at him. "You'll find out." She turned and walked out of the chamber. The human delegation followed her. Behind them, the laughter continued. No one took the threat seriously. Humans had never won a war against the coalition. Many species had tried to resist or rebel over the centuries. All had been crushed. But as the human delegation's ship left the council station and jumped to faster-than-light speed, activated a secure channel to Earth. "Mr. President," she said quietly, "it's time. Activate Project Nightfall." On Earth, in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Menu received the authorization codes he had been waiting 20 years to receive. He looked at the men and women around him. They were the best military minds humanity had ever produced. They had spent decades preparing for this moment. "Ladies and," General said softly, "we are now at war. Begin Phase 1. Cut all communications with Coalition space. Evacuate all human colonies and stations. Bring our people home and activate the weapons." All across human space, the lights went out. Communication networks went silent. Human colonies that had been full of people one day were completely empty the next. Ships vanished from trade routes. Stations went dark. To the rest of the galaxy, it seemed like humanity had simply run away. They had no idea what was actually happening. They didn't know that humanity had been preparing for this day since they first realized the galaxy would never treat them as equals. They didn't know about the secret shipyards in the cloud. They didn't know about the weapons research that had continued in hidden laboratories for generations. They didn't know that humans had been studying their enemies, learning their weaknesses, and planning for war. The galaxy laughed at humanity's withdrawal. They called it cowardice. They called it surrender. They made jokes about the scared little humans running back to their single planet. They would not be laughing for long. 3 months passed in complete silence. The galaxy continued its business as usual. The Empire moved into former human territories and claimed them as their own. They stripped the abandoned colonies for resources. They laughed about how easily they had scared away the humans. In the Galactic Council chambers, representatives discussed the human problem. Most agreed that humanity had learned its place. A few species expressed mild concern about where all the humans had gone, but no one investigated too carefully. Humans were not important enough to worry about. But in the darkness beyond explored space, humanity was far from idle. General Menu stood in the command center of Fortress Prime, a massive military station hidden in the cloud of the Sol system. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of every human ship, every weapon platform, and every soldier in the largest military mobilization in human history. "Status report," said calmly. A young officer responded immediately. "All fleets are in position, sir. The civilian evacuation is complete. Every human citizen is now within protected space. Our intelligence networks report that they suspect nothing." "Good," said, "and Doctor, is Project Nightmare ready?" "She says yes, sir. All weapon systems are operational and tested." General allowed himself a small smile. 20 years he had worked on this plan. 20 years of secret preparations, hidden budgets, and weapons development that the Coalition would have banned if they had known about it. But they had never bothered to look. They never thought peaceful, weak humanity would dare to build such things. In Laboratory 7, deep in the heart of Fortress Prime, Doctor made final adjustments to her greatest creation. She was a small woman with tired eyes, but her mind was one of the sharpest in human space. Before her floated a device no larger than a basketball. It looked simple, almost innocent. "Are you sure this will work?" asked her assistant, a young man named. "I'm sure," said quietly. "I've tested it 100 times. When activated near a shield generator, it will cause a quantum cascade reaction. The shield will collapse inward and explode. The stronger the shield, the bigger the explosion." "That's terrifying," said. "Yes," agreed. "Most of our weapons are terrifying, that's the point. The Coalition species fight wars like games. They have rules, honor, and codes of conduct. We don't. We fight to win, and we use every advantage we can find. They're about to learn why Earth's history is written in blood." Across human space, over 10,000 ships prepared for war. They were not like Coalition vessels. They were smaller, faster, and packed with weapons that prioritized psychological impact over raw power. Captain Nam commanded one of the Special Forces squadrons. His job had been to spend the last 3 months mapping Coalition space. He and his team had infiltrated dozens of enemy systems. They had planted sensors, sabotage devices, and sleeper programs in computer networks. They had identified every major military installation, every shipyard, and every command center. The Coalition's security was laughable. They never expected anyone to be bold enough to spy on them. "Sir, we've received the final go-ahead," said second-in-command Lieutenant. "Operation begins in 72 hours. "Excellent," said. "Send the signal to all our assets. It's time to activate the surprises we've left for them." In the Empire's main military headquarters, Admiral Al reviewed reports of his species' expansion into former human space. Everything was going well. The humans had abandoned valuable resources, including several partially built stations and industrial facilities. They were claiming it all. Al's aide entered the office. "Admiral, we're receiving a strange transmission from human space." "Humans?" Al laughed. "I thought they had all run back to their little planet. What do they want?" "It's not a message, sir. It's just coordinates and a date, 2 weeks from now." Al studied the coordinates. They pointed to a location in neutral space, far from any settlement, probably some kind of peace negotiation. They're finally ready to beg forgiveness. Ignore it. But the same message went to every major power in the coalition. Coordinates and a date, nothing else. Some species ignored it, others debated its meaning. A few sent scouts to investigate the coordinates, but they found nothing. Empty space. Stood on the bridge of the warship Indomitable, one of humanity's and most powerful vessels. Around him, the crew worked quietly and efficiently. They were all veterans, all survivors of new. They had personal reasons to be here. "How are you feeling?" asked Park. She had been assigned to the ship as chief medical officer. After Valley, she had refused to stay in safety. If humans were going to war, she would be there to save lives. "Nervous," admitted. "We're about to attack the most powerful military empire in the galaxy. If we fail, humanity is finished." "We won't fail," said with certainty. "I've seen what we've prepared. I've seen the weapons, the plans, and the determination in every soldier's eyes. They made us into this. They're going to regret it." The appointed day arrived. Every major coalition government watched the coordinates from the mysterious human message. Some sent ships to observe. They sent a small patrol fleet, expecting to intercept human diplomats. Then reality seemed to tear open. Hundreds of human ships appeared at once, dropping out of imperfect formation. The coalition observers were shocked. They had never seen technology like this. Human ships had appeared without the normal spatial distortions. They had traveled through routes no one knew existed. The patrol fleet raised their shields and prepared to fight. Then, without warning, every system on every ship simply stopped working. Engines died. Weapons went offline. Communications failed. Life support sputtered and weakened. The ships floated dead in space. On the flagship, the captain frantically tried to restore power. Nothing worked. His computer screens flickered and showed a message in perfect script. "We have complete access to your systems. We have had access for 3 months. We could have destroyed you any time we wanted. But we wanted you to know. We wanted you to understand what's coming." Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the human ships vanished. They jumped away, leaving the disabled patrol behind. Within an hour, the Empire's military command knew something was terribly wrong. Their ship systems had been compromised. But how deep did it go? General watched the reports come in from the observation raid. Everything had gone perfectly. Now they knew they were vulnerable. Now they would be afraid. That was good. Fear was a weapon, and humanity had learned to use it well. "Send the message," ordered. Across the entire galaxy, on every communication channel, a message broadcast in every known language. It was Ambassador Lee's voice, calm and cold. "People of the Galactic Coalition, you have ignored humanity for too long. You have exploited us, dismissed us, and murdered us. We asked for justice and you laughed. We asked for peace and you gave us war. Now you will have the war you wanted and you will learn what humanity really is. We are not your servants. We are not your victims. We are survivors of 1,000 wars on a death world you couldn't last a day on. We have killed each other for resources, territory, and beliefs since before your civilizations existed. We learned mercy and peace through millions of deaths. We offered you that peace. You chose violence. Now you will see what we were protecting you from. This is your only warning. Humanity is coming, and we will not stop until we have justice for every victim of your cruelty." The message ended. Across the galaxy, governments scrambled to respond. Some called for immediate military action. Others urged caution. A few smaller species quietly began negotiating with human representatives, hoping to stay out of the coming storm. The Empress held an emergency war council. "We must crush these humans immediately," she declared. "They have embarrassed us. We will show them the price of defiance." Her military advisors agreed. The Empire began mobilizing its fleets, calling in ships from across their territory. They would gather an armada large enough to overwhelm human space completely. It would take 2 weeks to assemble, but once ready, it would be unstoppable. They did not know that Captain Nam and his Special Forces teams had been waiting for exactly this. As ships gathered at their staging points, human sabotage devices activated. Shipyards experienced mysterious accidents. Fuel depots exploded. Computer systems were infected with viruses that would activate at crucial moments. They did not notice the small problems yet. They were too focused on their grand offensive. In his quarters on Fortress Prime, General studied star charts and fleet positions. His staff thought he was brilliant, a strategic genius. The truth was simpler. He had spent 20 years studying human military history. The wars of Earth had been brutal, creative, and total. He had learned from Napoleon, from Sun, and from countless others. The galaxy fought wars with rules. Humanity fought wars to win. "Sir, all fleets report ready," an aide said. "Good," replied. "Then let us begin teaching the galaxy why you should never back a human into a corner. When we have nothing left to lose, we become the most dangerous creatures in the universe. Execute Phase 2. And across 17 star systems, human ships dropped out of and opened fire. The attacks came at exactly the same moment across 17 different star systems. The Empire had spread across a third of the galaxy, and humanity struck at its heart all at once. No one had thought such coordination was possible. The coalition military doctrine said you attacked one target at a time, with overwhelming force. Humans ignored that doctrine completely. Commander led the assault on Minor, the location of the Empire's primary military academy. It was where officers were trained, where their military traditions were taught. It was a symbol of their power. Had volunteered for this mission personally. Her brother had died at Valley. The human fleet dropped out of directly above the academy complex. They scrambled to respond, but their planetary shields activated slowly. It was peacetime protocol. They never expected an attack here, so far from any conflict zone. "Deploy the quantum disruptors," ordered calmly. Doctor's devices were launched toward the shield generators. When they made contact, the results were exactly as she had predicted. The shields did not simply fail. They collapsed inward, and the energy had nowhere to go except into explosive release. The generators exploded with the force of small nuclear weapons. The chain reaction took out power stations, defense platforms, and communication towers. "Broadcasting on all frequencies," said, "I want every world to see this." She opened a live feed showing the academy burning. Young cadets ran through the streets in panic. Buildings collapsed. The humans did not target the cadets themselves, but the message was clear. Your children are not safe. Your most protected facilities are not safe. Nowhere is safe. "This is for Valley," said into the broadcast. "This is for the 15,000 people you murdered. This is for every human you ever dismissed, exploited, or hurt. We remember. We always remember." The broadcast went out across every planet. Mothers and fathers watched the academy burn and realized their children in the military were now in terrible danger. Panic spread faster than any weapon could. On 7 other worlds, similar attacks happened simultaneously. Military bases were hit with precision strikes. Shipyards were crippled. Command centers were destroyed. But humans carefully avoided civilian targets. Every strike was surgical, calculated to destroy military capability while preserving civilian lives. It was not mercy. It was strategy. "We want them to know the difference between us and them," General had explained during the planning. "We want civilians to see that we could kill them but choose not to. We want them to ask why their government brought this on them. We want them to turn against their own leaders." It was working. Within 48 hours, protests erupted on civilian worlds. Parents demanded their children be brought home from the military. Workers refused to build weapons. The Empire's propaganda tried to rally support, but when people watched human forces destroy military targets while carefully avoiding cities, the propaganda rang hollow. Captain Nam led his Special Forces team deep into space. Their mission was psychological warfare on a personal level. They infiltrated communication networks and released files the government had kept secret. Files about Valley. Internal messages where commanders discussed the massacre, documents showing they had planned to kill human civilians from the start. "Let them see what their empire did in their name," said as he uploaded the files. "Let them carry that shame." The military tried to organize a response, but they were discovering a horrifying truth. Their computer systems were compromised at every level. Navigation systems provided false coordinates. Targeting computers missed by margins that seemed impossibly precise. Communication networks failed at crucial moments. Ships that should have been combat-ready had mysterious maintenance issues. Admiral Al stood in the Empire's main war room and watched their strategic map fall apart. Red markers showing damaged or destroyed facilities by the hour. Blue markers showing fleet positions kept vanishing as ships went offline. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "How can these primitives be everywhere at once?" A technician finally found part of the answer. "Sir, we've detected infiltration code in our systems. It's been there for months, maybe longer. They've had access to everything." Everything? Al felt sick. Everything, fleet positions, patrol routes, supply lines. They knew where all our ships would be. They knew our defensive protocols. They've been watching us prepare to fight them, and they used that knowledge to strike where we were weakest. On the human flagship Indomitable reviewed the battle reports. 3 weeks into the war, and the Empire had lost 70% of its military infrastructure. Human casualties were minimal. It was not even close to a fair fight. "Does this bother you?" Park asked him. She had been watching his face as he studied the casualty numbers. "Yes," admitted. "We're destroying them. We're doing to them what they did to us, but faster and more efficiently. When does that make us as bad as them?" "When we start targeting civilians," said firmly. "When we stop caring about innocent lives. When we kill for the sake of killing. We're not doing that. Every target is military. Every strike is calculated. We're not monsters. We're just finally showing them what we're capable of when they push us too far." "I hope you're right," said quietly. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. For the first time in Coalition history, they were genuinely afraid. A species they had dismissed as weak and primitive was systematically destroying one of the major powers, and they were doing it in ways that broke every rule of warfare the Council understood. "They're using illegal weapons," one representative complained. "Their quantum disruptors violate the Geneva Protocols." The Geneva Protocols were written by humans on Earth for human conflicts, Ambassador Lee pointed out. She had returned to address the Council one final time. "You never signed them. You never agreed to our rules of war. So now you get to experience war without rules." "This is barbaric," another representative shouted. "No," said coldly. "Barbaric is killing 15,000 civilians and calling it collateral damage. Barbaric is 200 years of exploitation and dismissal. What we're doing is just war. We're showing you what humans are really good at. We're teaching you why we spent so long learning to be peaceful. We were never weak. We were just trying to be better than our history. You made us remember that history." The council chamber erupted in arguments. Some species demanded immediate action against humanity. Others urged negotiation. A few, the smaller and weaker species, quietly expressed support for the human position. They too had been exploited by the major powers. They too had been dismissed. In another part of the galaxy, 3 coalition species independently reached out to human diplomats. They offered neutrality agreements. They promised not to interfere in the war. In exchange, they asked for human protection from other coalition powers who might see their neutrality as betrayal. General approved the agreements immediately. "We're not trying to conquer the galaxy," he told his staff. "We're trying to fix it. Any species willing to treat us as equals gets our protection. Any species that continues to oppose us gets what they are getting." Doctor stood in her laboratory, watching the reports from the front lines. Her weapons were performing exactly as designed. The quantum disruptors, the cyber warfare packages, the kinetic bombardment systems that turned orbital mechanics into precision artillery. All of it worked perfectly. But she felt sick. She had created these things knowing they would kill people. She had designed them to be as terrifying as possible because fear was a strategic asset. Now she watched the results and wondered about the cost to her own soul. "Doctor," her assistant stood at the door. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," said honestly. "I created weapons that will be remembered in history books. Children will learn about the quantum wars and the technology that changed everything. But they were my equations, my theories, my devices. Does that make me a hero or a monster?" "Neither," said gently. "It makes you human. We all carry the weight of what we had to do, but remember why we did it. Remember Valley. Remember every human who died because the galaxy thought we were weak." The Empress held an emergency meeting with her advisors. The military situation was catastrophic. Public opinion had turned against the war. The economy was collapsing as trade routes were cut off. And now reports were coming in that other coalition species were making peace with humanity. "What are our options?" the Empress asked. Her senior admiral looked defeated. "We can surrender, or we can fight until they destroy us completely. There are no other options. The humans have won." "How?" the Empress demanded. "We had the larger fleet. We had superior numbers. How did a single species defeat us in 3 weeks?" "Because they understood something we didn't," the admiral said quietly. "War is not about honor or glory. War is about breaking the enemy's will to fight. They studied us. They learned our psychology. They hit us in ways we never prepared for. They didn't fight our military. They fought our society, our confidence, and our belief in our own superiority. And they won that fight before the first shot was even fired." The Empress closed her eyes. She thought about the messages coming from colony worlds. People demanding peace. Families grieving for soldiers who died in a pointless war of aggression. Citizens asking why their government had attacked the humans in the first place. The Empire was tearing itself apart from the inside. "Prepare a surrender offer," she said finally. "Tell the humans we will meet whatever terms they demand." When the surrender offer reached General, he studied it carefully. Then he composed a response that was broadcast across the entire galaxy. "The Empire has requested terms of surrender. We accept. Here are our demands. 1. All military forces will stand down immediately. 2. The Empire will pay reparations to the families of every victim of Valley. 3. The officers responsible for ordering the massacre will be turned over for trial. 4. Territory will be reduced and monitored to ensure no further aggression. 5. The Empire will formally recognize humanity's equal status in the galaxy. These terms are not negotiable. You have 72 hours to comply. Refuse, and we will show you what human warfare looks like when we stop holding back." The galaxy listened to that message and understood. Humanity had crushed the Empire while still holding back. They had weapons and tactics they had not even used yet. The thought was terrifying. The Empress accepted every term. She had no choice. The fall of the Empire sent shockwaves through the galaxy. 3 other major coalition species immediately sued for peace. They signed non-aggression treaties with humanity and agreed to recognize humans as equals. But the Galactic Council itself, the governing body of the coalition, refused to accept the new reality. "We cannot allow one species to dictate terms to the entire galaxy," declared the collective's representative. "If humans are allowed to win through violence, it sets a dangerous precedent. Every minor species will think they can rebel." The Council's solution was predictable. They called for a grand fleet. 40 coalition species contributed ships. Within 2 months, over 10,000 warships gathered at the Shattered Gate, a massive space station that served as the coalition's military headquarters. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Admiral Shin stood on the bridge of the human flagship Retribution and studied the sensor data. The enemy fleet outnumbered her forces 20 to 1. By traditional military thinking, This battle was already lost. But humans had stopped using traditional military thinking the moment the war began. "All ships report ready," her tactical officer said. "Good," said calmly. "Let's show them why numbers don't matter anymore." She was young for an admiral, only 38 years old. But she had grown up studying military history. She knew every major battle humanity had ever fought. She knew that smaller forces had defeated larger ones throughout history when they used superior tactics, technology, and creativity. Today would be another example for the history books. The coalition fleet advanced in perfect formation. It was beautiful in its own way, thousands of ships moving in coordinated patterns. They had planned this assault for weeks. Their strategy was simple: use overwhelming numbers to crush the human fleet, then push into human space and force a surrender. What they did not know was that Captain Nam's special forces had infiltrated the shattered gate station months ago. They had placed surveillance equipment everywhere. Humanity knew every detail of the coalition's battle plan. When the fleets engaged, the coalition expected a traditional battle: ships exchanging fire, shields against weapons, tactics and countertactics. What they got was something completely different. The human fleet suddenly split apart. Ships scattered in all directions with no apparent pattern. The coalition fleet, confused by this chaos, tried to maintain formation and pursue multiple targets at once. That was when the drones arrived. Millions of small automated ships appeared from seemingly nowhere. They had been hiding in the debris field around the shattered gate, inactive and undetectable until the moment they activated. Each drone was barely larger than a fighter craft, but they carried weapons and operated with artificial intelligence that made them as effective as crewed ships. Doctor had spent 5 years developing the drone swarms. She understood something the coalition species did not. Intelligence and consciousness were not required for war. Machines could fight just as effectively as living beings, and they could coordinate with perfect precision. The drones swarmed the coalition fleet like insects. They moved in patterns too fast for organic crews to track. They struck weak points in shields and armor with accuracy no living pilot could match. They communicated with each other through quantum-entangled networks that could not be jammed or intercepted. Within the first hour, the coalition fleet lost over 1,000 ships. Within 4 hours, they had lost 5,000. The human casualties were minimal. Only a handful of crewed ships were even damaged. On the coalition flagship, the commander watched in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. "How is this possible? They're outnumbered 20 to 1. "They're not fighting a traditional battle," his tactical officer said. "They're using automation. Those drones are all controlled by artificial intelligence. They can react faster than we can. They can coordinate better than we can, and there are millions of them. Then target the control ships. Destroy whatever is commanding the drones." "There are no control ships," the officer said desperately. "Each drone is autonomous. They operate as a swarm with no central command. We can't cut off the head because there is no head." The battle lasted 8 hours. When it ended, the coalition fleet had been completely destroyed. The human fleet had suffered only 300 casualties. The drone swarms had lost approximately 40% of their units, but drones could be rebuilt. Trained crews could not be replaced so easily. Admiral broadcast a message to every coalition world. "This is what human warfare looks like when we are pushed to our limits. We do not need large fleets. We do not need traditional tactics. We use technology, innovation, and the willingness to think differently. Every species that continues to fight us will meet the same fate. The choice is yours." The message was reinforced by another broadcast from Doctor. She appeared on screens across the galaxy, standing in her laboratory. Behind her was a device that looked almost like a work of art, all smooth curves and glowing energy fields. "I am Doctor," she said calmly. "I am the lead weapons researcher for the human military. What you see behind me is a planet killer. It uses quantum destabilization to cause tectonic collapse on any rocky planet. The process is irreversible and will destroy all life on the surface within 48 hours. We have 17 of these devices. We hope never to use them. But if the coalition continues this war, we will deploy them against military staging worlds. We will not target civilian populations directly, but we will make it impossible for you to fight us. The choice is yours, peace or planetary destruction. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The coalition had weapons that could destroy cities, even continents. But weapons that could destroy entire planets had been banned for thousands of years. The technology existed, but no civilized species would use it. Except humanity, it seemed, had no such reservations. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. For 3 days, representatives argued. Some wanted to continue the war. Others urged immediate peace. A few smaller species openly questioned why they were fighting humanity at all. Ambassador Lee attended this session as an observer. She sat silently and watched them argue. Finally, the collective's representative turned to her. "What do you want?" he asked, exhausted. "Why are you doing this? You claim you want peace, but you're destroying us." "We want what we've always wanted," said simply. "Respect, equality, justice for those you murdered. We want the galaxy to understand that humanity is not weak, not primitive, and not your servants. We want you to acknowledge that we earned our place among the stars just like every other species. That's all. Give us that and this war ends today." "And if we refuse?" "Then we continue," said coldly. "We will dismantle the coalition piece by piece. We will destroy every fleet you send against us. We will isolate every world that opposes us. And if you force us to the absolute extreme, we will use the planet killers. Not because we want to, but because you will have left us no other choice." The council chamber was silent. On Earth, walked through a memorial park dedicated to Valley. 15,000 names were carved into black stone. He read them sometimes when he needed to remember why they were fighting. His parents' names were there. His sister's name. So many people he had known. Park found him there. She often came to the memorial too. She had lost everyone she loved in the massacre. "Do you think we're becoming monsters?" asked her quietly. "We've killed hundreds of thousands, maybe millions by now. They killed 15,000 of us. Are we proportional anymore?" "We're not killing civilians," said. "We're dismantling military forces that attacked us, and we're doing it as cleanly as possible. Yes, people are dying. That's what war is. But we're not massacring innocents. We're not bombing cities. We're fighting military targets and offering peace at every step. That's the difference." "I hope you're right," said. "I hope when this is over, we can still look at ourselves and see something worth preserving." General stood in his command center and received the reports. The Battle of the Shattered Gate had broken the coalition's will to fight. 7 more species were requesting peace negotiations. The council was finally discussing surrender terms, but felt no triumph. He had studied enough military history to know that wars created scars that lasted generations. The galaxy would remember this conflict forever. Some would remember humanity as liberators who stood up against oppression. Others would remember them as destroyers who used terrible weapons without mercy. "Sir," an aide approached. "The Galactic Council is requesting formal peace negotiations." "Tell them we accept," said. "But our terms remain the same: complete equality for humanity, reparations for Valley, war crimes trials for those responsible, and a complete reformation of the Council to include proper representation for smaller species. If they agree to all of this, the war ends immediately." The aide hesitated. "Sir, some of the staff are concerned. If we demand too much, we might push them back into fighting." "They won't fight," said with certainty. "They can't. We've destroyed their fleets. We've broken their confidence. And most importantly, we've shown them that we're willing to use weapons they're afraid of. They'll agree to our terms because the alternative is too terrible to consider." He was right. 3 days later, the Galactic Council agreed to every human demand. The war was over. Humanity had won. But as Admiral Shin watched the surrender documents being signed, she wondered about the future. "We won the war," she said to her first officer. "But can we win the peace? Can we turn enemies into partners? Can we heal the wounds we've caused?" "I don't know," her officer admitted. "But we have to try, because if we can't build something better from all this destruction, then maybe we really are the monsters they feared." 6 months after the ceasefire, the Treaty of Terra was signed on Earth in a ceremony attended by representatives from every major species in the galaxy. The document was thousands of pages long, covering everything from territorial rights to trade agreements to military limitations. But the core principles were simple. All species were equal under galactic law, and aggression against any member would be met with collective response. The treaty also established the War Crimes Tribunal, had been asked to serve as one of the judges. He initially refused, saying he was too close to what had happened, but Ambassador Lee convinced him. "You need to be there," she said. "The victims deserve to have someone who understands their pain, and the galaxy needs to see that we're serious about justice, not revenge." So found himself sitting in a courtroom in Geneva, watching as officers were brought in chains to face charges. The lead prosecutor was a human lawyer named Myra, who had lost her entire family at Valley. She presented evidence calmly and methodically: video recordings, testimony from survivors, internal communications showing the massacre had been premeditated. The officers tried to defend themselves. They claimed they were following orders. They said the humans had been warned to evacuate. They insisted it was not their fault that civilians had not left fast enough. Park was called to testify. She stood before the court and described what she had witnessed. Her voice never wavered as she detailed the deaths of children, the burning of hospitals, and the soldiers who had laughed while they killed. When she finished, even some of the observers in the courtroom looked sick. The tribunal took 3 months to reach verdicts. The senior officers who had ordered the massacre were found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. The soldiers who had carried out the killings received varying sentences based on their individual actions. Some species criticized the sentences as too harsh. Others said they were too lenient, but most agreed that justice had been served. Meanwhile, reconstruction began across the galaxy. Human engineers helped rebuild military bases that had been destroyed in the war. Human doctors worked in hospitals treating wounded soldiers and civilians. It confused many. Why would their enemies help them? Oversaw the rebuilding of New. The colony had been abandoned during the war, but now humans were returning. Walking through the empty streets brought back memories both painful and precious. This had been his home. It would be again. He was surprised when a delegation approached him one day. They were led by a young female named Sella. She and her group were civilians who had opposed the war from the beginning. "Commander," she said formally, "we wanted to apologize. Not all supported what happened here. Many of us protested against the massacre, but we failed to stop our government. We carry that shame." Studied her carefully. He could have rejected the apology. He could have held onto his anger. Instead, he thought about what had said during the trial. "We're not doing this for revenge. We're doing it for justice." "I accept your apology," said, "and I want you to know something. We don't hate your people. We hate what your government did. There's a difference. If you truly want peace, then help us build it." Sella nodded, relief visible on her face. "How can we help?" "Start by telling your children what really happened," said. "Don't let them grow up believing propaganda. Teach them the truth. Teach them that what happened here was wrong. That's how we prevent it from happening again." Doctor stood in what had been her weapons laboratory. Now it was being converted into a research center for defensive technologies and disaster relief engineering. The planet killer devices had been dismantled. The quantum disruptors had been restricted to defensive use only. The drone swarms were being for rescue operations and construction work. "Do you regret it?" asked who was helping with the conversion, "creating those weapons?" "Every day," said honestly, "but I also understand why it was necessary. Sometimes you have to be willing to destroy in order to protect. The galaxy only listened to us because we proved we could hurt them worse than they could hurt us. I hate that reality, but I accept it." "What will you work on now?" asked. "Medical technology," said with a small smile. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life saving as many people as I killed. It won't balance the scales, but it's something." Captain Nam had been assigned a new role. He now led the Peacekeeping Academy, where humans trained soldiers from other species in conflict resolution and defensive tactics. Many species had requested the training, wanting to understand how humans thought about warfare. "The key," told a class of mixed-species cadets, "is to understand that warfare is about psychology. You don't win by destroying the enemy. You win by convincing them they cannot win. We defeated the coalition not because we had bigger ships, but because we understood how they thought. We studied them for years. We learned their fears, their tactics, and their weaknesses. Knowledge is the ultimate weapon." A cadet raised his hand. "But don't the humans fear retaliation? Don't you worry that someday another species will study you the way you studied us?" "Of course we worry about that," said. "That's why we're teaching you. We want the galaxy to understand our methods so that everyone can defend themselves. We don't want to be the only species who knows how to fight effectively. We want peace through mutual strength, not peace through fear." Admiral Shin had been promoted to Supreme Commander of the Coalition Defense Forces. She was the first human to hold the position. It was both an honor and a burden. She was responsible for coordinating military responses across the entire galaxy. Her first major decision was controversial. She ordered that half of the coalition's military budget be redirected to early warning systems, diplomatic corps, and conflict prevention programs. "We need to stop wars before they start," she explained to the council. "Fighting should always be the last option, not the first. We've proven we can win wars. Now let's prove we can prevent them." Ambassador Lee was elected to the Galactic Council's high command. She was the first human on the ruling body. On her first day, she proposed a complete reformation of how disputes were resolved. "From now on," she said, "any species claiming ancient territorial rights must provide evidence and allow neutral arbitration. No more automatic rulings in favor of powerful species. No more dismissing the concerns of smaller species. We're all equal now, and we need systems that reflect that equality." The proposal passed unanimously. Everyone had learned what happened when you dismissed humanity's concerns. 10 years passed. Nu was fully rebuilt and thriving. The memorial to Valley stood at the center of the main city, visited by thousands of beings from across the galaxy every year. It had become a symbol not just of tragedy, but of the peace that tragedy had ultimately created. Walked through the memorial garden with his adopted children. 3 of them were orphans whose parents had died in the war. He had adopted them 5 years ago, wanting to prove that forgiveness was possible. "Father," asked his youngest daughter, a girl named Sella, named after the woman who had first apologized to him, "why did the war happen?" Knelt down to her level. "Because people forgot that we're all the same in the ways that matter. We all want to live in peace. We all want to protect our families. We all deserve respect. The war happened because some beings forgot that and thought they were better than others." "Will it happen again?" she asked with innocent worry. "Maybe," said honestly. "But now everyone knows what happens when you start a war with humanity. And more importantly, now everyone knows why we fight so hard for peace. We're not aggressive. We're just very, very good at defending ourselves when we need to." Park continued to work as a doctor, but now she led a medical exchange program. Doctors from hundreds of species came to study human medicine, and human doctors went to learn alien techniques. She had discovered that healing brought more satisfaction than revenge ever could. General Minu had retired from active military service. He spent his days writing books about military strategy and teaching at the War Academy. His lectures were attended by students from every major species. They wanted to understand how one man had orchestrated the defeat of an entire empire. "I didn't do it alone," he always told them. "I had brilliant people like Doctor creating weapons. I had brave soldiers like Captain Nam gathering intelligence. I had politicians like Ambassador Lee who never gave up on diplomacy. War is never about one person. It's about everyone working together toward a common goal." In his private moments, wondered if he had made the right choices. The war had killed millions. It had changed the galaxy forever, but it had also brought about real change. Species that had been oppressed for centuries now had voices. The council was more democratic. Wars of aggression had become almost impossible because everyone feared repeating the mistake they had made. Was it worth it? His wife asked him one evening as they watched the sunset from their home in Seoul. "I don't know," admitted. "Ask me in 100 years. If the galaxy is more peaceful, more just, and more equal, then maybe it was worth it. If we just created new enemies and new conflicts, then it was all for nothing." A new crisis emerged on the edge of known space. An aggressive species called the Dominion began threatening peaceful colonies. The Galactic Council convened immediately. Everyone looked to Ambassador Lee, who was now elderly but still sharp. "What should we do?" asked a nervous council member. Stood slowly. Her hair was white now, her face lined with age, but her voice was still strong. "We do what we should have done with the before the war. We send diplomats. We try to understand their grievances. We offer peaceful solutions. We make every possible effort to resolve this without violence." "And if they refuse?" someone asked. "Then we remind them what happened the last time someone threatened peaceful colonists," said coldly. "The colony will be protected. We will send negotiators first, as we always do. But let me be very clear to the Dominion and anyone else who might consider aggression. Humanity remembers what happens when peace fails. We remain ready. We will always remain ready. The galaxy crossed a line once, and we taught it where that line is drawn. We pray we never have to teach that lesson again." The message was broadcast across the galaxy. Within hours, the Dominion its claim on the colony. Their ambassador released a statement saying they had been mistaken about the territory. No one was fooled. They had been reminded of what happened to the Empire. They had chosen wisdom over pride. The human delegates in the council chamber stood to leave. As they walked out, a young aide asked Admiral Shin a question. "Do you think there will ever be another war?" Considered the question carefully. "Probably. Conflict is part of life. But I think the wars of the future will be different. Now everyone knows what humanity is capable of. They know we prefer peace but excel at war. They know we're creative, determined, and willing to use any advantage we can find. Most importantly, they know we'll defend not just ourselves but any species that's threatened. That knowledge changes everything." "How so?" the aide asked. "Because now the bullies of the galaxy have to think twice," said with a slight smile. "They have to ask themselves if whatever they want is worth facing human intervention. Most of the time, the answer is no. And that's how we build a lasting peace. Not through being the strongest, but through being the most willing to defend the weak and the most capable of doing so effectively." They walked through the halls of the council building. On the walls were murals depicting the Treaty of Terra signing. Humans and aliens standing together. Peace after war. Hope after horror. Now an old man stood in the rebuilt settlement of Valley. The memorial had been expanded over the years. It now included names from both sides of the conflict. Human victims and soldiers who had died in the war. It was controversial but had insisted. "We remember everyone," he said at the dedication ceremony. "Not to honor those who caused harm, but to remember the cost of forgetting that we're all living beings who deserve peace. This memorial asks one question of everyone who visits: what did you learn from this tragedy? If your answer is hatred, you learned nothing. If your answer is the value of peace, you learned everything. 50 years after the war ended, historians wrote their accounts. They debated whether humanity had been justified in their response. They analyzed every battle, every decision, and every consequence. Some called it the Liberation War. Others called it the Humiliation War. Most simply called it the Reckoning. What no one disputed was that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The old order of powerful species dominating weaker ones was gone. In its place was a more balanced system where might did not automatically make right. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still injustices, and still problems. But when new crises arose, the galaxy remembered. They remembered what happened when they dismissed humanity's warnings. They remembered the price of aggression. They remembered that the small, peaceful species on the edge of known space was actually the most dangerous force in the galaxy when provoked. And so, for the most part, peace continued. Not because everyone agreed on everything, but because everyone understood the alternative. The humans had proven they could wage total war and win, but they had also proven they preferred peace and were willing to help others achieve it. That was the true lesson of the war. Humanity had not become conquerors. They had become guardians. They had shown the galaxy that strength and compassion could coexist, that you could be willing to destroy while choosing to build, that the most powerful weapon was not a planet killer, but the wisdom to know when not to use it. The memorial on Nu carried an inscription that became famous across the galaxy. It was written in every known language, and it read, "Here died 15,000 innocents. Their deaths sparked a war that killed millions. From this tragedy, we learned that peace is not weakness and that violence, once begun, is hard to stop. Let all who visit remember, the best way to honor the dead is to protect the living." And the galaxy, slowly and imperfectly, tried to do exactly that.